So, welcome. Here we are as we continue through this book on the pathwork of self-transformation, which is a material that was channeled by a woman by the name of Eva Pierakkos from 1907 to 78. And there was 258 lectures that were channeled. Welcome, Lori. These lectures kind of comprise this body of material that became known as the Pathwork of Self-Transformation. And the lectures cover a great many topics, but as a whole, they actually are quite complete in outlining a real path of spiritual development. And it's perfect for these days and these times because the guide says it's not about belief and there's no, thing you have to believe. He asks us to keep an open mind, to try things on for size. If they work for us, great. And it does have a certain metaphysical, way that it presents things, but he's really saying that there's nothing here that we have to believe. It's a practical path. And so it'll either work for us or not. And, in my experience, I got involved in this back in 1984, and it's just been something that has guided me and informed my journey ever since. So this lecture is in this little book that you can get on Kindle, Amazon, called Creative Emptiness is the chapter that we're reading, number 17, but it's in the book of the Pathwork of Self-Transformation. And so one other person's coming in. Wait a minute. Hey, Lori, can you hear us? Yeah, connecting to audio. Hi, Lori. Welcome. We're just beginning to start this lecture, so feel free. Yeah.
No.
Feel free to, join in and ask questions, comment. We kind of I'll start reading and I'll pause occasionally to check in, but also feel free to interrupt if there's something that catches your attention and you want to either comment or ask about. Okay, so here we go. Creative emptiness. Now this in italics is a little piece of writing from the editors summarizing something in the lecture. So they say, in order to reach the greatest heights of spirituality, we need to learn to become receptive channels for the God consciousness. We cannot achieve such a state without knowing how to still the outer mind. This is yet another step into the unknown, into a temporary sensation of inner emptiness. The reward for taking it is the opening of a channel through which we can always contact the voice of God within. So the guide begins. My most beloved friends, blessings for every one of you. A golden force is flowing through your inner being now and forever if you open yourself to it. I have spoken to you about the coming of a new era. This event requires that many human beings be ready for it. For many years, you on this path have worked for that purpose, whether or not you were aware of it. You have filed away impurities, and you still do. And you make yourself available for a powerful force that has been released in the universe, the inner universe. Many spiritual teachers and channels know this, but many have misinterpreted this event. They believe it will bring geological cataclysms with effects on a human level. As I have said before, this is not true. The changes that are already in progress are changes in consciousness. And you are working at this. You see, as you develop and purify yourself, you become more and more ready for an inner enlightenment that has not yet occurred and is indeed self-perpetuating in its force. It is unprecedented, for there was no other time in human history when this power was as available as it is now. I mean, just as an aside, some of the channels that I've been listening to are kind of saying that this is really truly unprecedented, that a kind of like the collective of humanity is poised to, transform within a given lifetime into a whole nother level. So they use the term metamorphosis, right? And it's, something that has never, I guess, in the universe been witnessed or accomplished before. So, there's a lot of, the realms of, angelic intelligence and, maybe other civilizations in the galaxies and the universe, that are all kind of present for this birthing. And it's interesting to me that the guide, back in I don't know when this, I didn't look at when this actually was channeled, but somewhere between 57 and 78, this is one of the ones that is a little further along, but probably towards the end of that time, but there's this, again, consistency with other spiritual paths and other spiritual teachings that I find, like helps to, really, firm this in my understanding. So continuing on, says what you increasingly experience is the result of this power coming upon a receptive channel. It is, if this power hits an unreceptive channel, a crisis arises, as you well know, even if only a part of you blocks the creative forces that could make you thrive in an entirely new way. You put yourself under great psychic, emotional, and spiritual stress. This must be avoided. On your path, you have learned to contact. Somebody else is coming in here, so I'm going to pause here for a second. Welcome. Hi.
Hi. So sorry.
That's okay, Laura. Welcome. Glad you could join us. We're sort of, reading through this Pathwork lecture. I don't know if you've been here before, but, feel free just to come in if you have a question or a comment as we're reading, and then I'll try to pause and check in and make some comments myself. But we're basically reading from the, Pathwork of self-transformation from the lecture on creative emptiness that the guide channeled.
Yes, thank you.
Eva Pierakkos. So welcome.
Thank you. My first Pathworks. Thank you. I'm
okay.
sorry.
Yeah, good. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So hopefully, yeah, this lecture will make some sense. And I think, we're not too far into it, so hopefully you can catch up with us a little bit.
Thank you.
So he's talking about basically, that this, channeling came in to kind of prepare, us for a huge kind of transition in consciousness. And he's talking about some of the prerequisites and some of the ABCs of making that transition, which I think when this was first was channeled was, 75 years away almost, but now is, I think coming closer and closer, and we're much more conscious of this, and many other channels are speaking of it. But I think when this was originally channeled, this was probably, one of the first announcements of this coming new age. So what you increasingly experience is the result of a power coming upon a receptive channel. And if this power hits an unreceptive channel, a crisis arises. So I kind of read that. Let me drop down. So on your path, you have learned to contact the deep levels of intentionality, where you deny truth and love, as well as a greater power that operates differently from the outer ego power you so strive for. Real truth and love, real power come from within. So how to open up to the new consciousness? I will now speak about the importance of being receptive to this force, this energy, this new consciousness, the Christ consciousness that is spreading through human consciousness wherever possible. To become receptive to it, you also need to understand another principle, that of creative emptiness. Most human beings create an agitated mind because they are frightened that they may be empty, that there may be nothing within to sustain them. This thought is rarely conscious, but on a path such as this, time comes when you do become conscious of this. And I would say other fearful thoughts. I mean, there, certainly this is one of them. I don't know if it's the only one, but, there certainly is a way that we, do fear this stillness, the silence inside, and the mind, even if it's not our conscious desire, is always, kind of generating thought and, keeping us busy inside. So the first reaction is very often, I do not even want to acknowledge that I am afraid of this. I'd rather continue busying my mind in order to not face the terror. And here he's describing that terror is a fear of a nothingness inside being who we are, right? That I am only a shell that needs sustenance from without. So, any comments or questions here? So I think most of us are like, now this was kind of new back then, but now, a lot of people really understand, a lot of fields and a lot of practices of meditation and, understanding of the importance of kind of calming our agitated and over busy mind. And so it's not so easy. And, he's saying that at some level there's a kind of fear to face what's inside of us, and this is distracting us. And it may be a nothingness inside, or we may just not want to really face what we're feeling or what we're, who we think we are, or, all kinds of different things. And so he says this self-deception is obviously futile. It is of utmost importance that you face this fear and deal with it openly. You need to create an atmosphere within yourself in which you allow this emptiness to exist. And we may think that we want it and long for it, but if it's not there, we need to also look at the part of us that may be resisting it. Otherwise, we perpetually deceive ourselves, which is wasteful, because the fear is unjustified. How can you ever live in peace with yourself if you do not know what you fear, and therefore make it impossible to find out that what you fear is not so? As a result of this process that has continued for centuries, humanity has conditioned itself to make the outer mind a very busy place, so that when that busyness ceases temporarily, the resulting quiet is confused with emptiness. It indeed seems empty. The noise will recede, and you must indeed embrace and welcome the emptiness as the most important channel through which to receive your innermost God self. So does that, make sense to people? Like, kind of like as we can become receptive and empty inside, it opens the connection to our, divine higher self, our guide, our God self, our, higher wisdom channel. And part of this is like really, we're all, developing to access our own unique channels. But when we're agitated, when we're, these thoughts are kind of, oppressing us or attacking us or, or just distracting us and keeping us spinning out into a million things. It's like there really is a kind of effort and intentionality, first of all, that we just need to put in, like working to drop into that emptiness. And there's some interesting, really receptive types of meditation. There's like a lot of active types of meditation. And I think those are not really kind of what we're going for here. But many, many different types of meditation are really receptive, and including sort of the Christian contemplative prayer, where, you're really inviting the Holy Spirit to come and live in you, and you're kind of just, intentionally creating this receptive inner space. And in this case, you're using like a mantra, but it's not like repeating it over and over to drown out the rest of the thoughts, but it's, kind of like just dropping it in and receiving it. So, and then mindfulness is also a very receptive form of meditation. And then the Pathwork guide, also talks about in some ways that we can help ourselves go into this emptiness. And I do want to just say, the Pathwork guide, Eva tended to refer to it as a he. The guide says, it's a collection of many beings that, create this. I don't know if it was just maybe one being that mostly projected and delivered this material. But truly, I think, it's not just a masculine being. I think at the level of spirit, the guide says, that those divisions are not so divinative. So I have this habit of referring to the guide as he. I don't know whether I can change that habit, but I want people to understand that, it's not really a gender identity that I'm establishing here. So the way leads through seeming contradictions. Anybody want to come in here? So there are several psychic and spiritual laws you need to comprehend in order to nurture this emptiness and make it a creative venture. Some of these laws seem to be contradictory. Let me put it this way. If you cannot let yourself be empty, you can never be filled. Out of the emptiness, a new fullness will arise. Yet you cannot disregard your fear. It must, like everything else, be gone through. My advice is that you challenge that fear and at the same time welcome the emptiness as the doorway to your divinity. So it's kind of like being with the fear, holding the fear, not trying to suppress it or deny it or, and yet, like we can still, while being in that fear, welcome, and that's our inner intention. That's the higher self aspect. There's another aspect of ourselves that's in fear, but the higher self is not, and it welcomes this emptiness as the doorway to our divinity. And we can align with that part of ourselves, and we can draw strength from that. And also, our kind of adult conscious understanding of our, positive ego, also recognizes this. So he says, this, way of both being with our fear and being, challenging that fear and welcoming the emptiness, he says, seems contradictory, but it is not. Both attitudes are necessary. Another apparent contradiction. It is extremely important that you be receptive and expectant, yet without preconceived ideas, impatience, or wishful thinking. So that's a big challenge, right? It's so hard for us to, like feel our longing and our, hope for something, and the guide says, everybody would be patient if we knew the results were certain. So, but we're always in this place where we don't see the results of our longing or, the results of our efforts and that kind of thing. And until we do, it's hard for us to trust, to rest, to, so we get anxious and, so he says, this seems very hard to explain in human words. It's something you have to feel into. There must be a positive expectancy that is yet free from preconceived notions of how and what should happen. So the more that we kind of like attach and cling to a certain idea of it, then sometimes that, blocks this state that, really is what we're going for. And so like we have to, be in a positive state, in a trusting and hopeful state. And yet, I think kind of one way I like it, I've heard it said is, we have to realize that the universe is probably going to bring us what we want in, in a way that's even better than what we could have imagined. And so like any of our, expectations kind of can block an even fuller possible unfolding. So, and again, if we can sort of stay in that emptiness, that not knowing, it's a very, profound creative place for us, where we're not bringing the past into the future, into into our next thing. And so that's what we need to truly, shift out of the old patterns and open to this whole new Christ consciousness, like he's talking about. Any comments, questions? Still another related apparent contradiction. You need to be specific, yet this specificity must be light and neutral. So again, what we're longing for, what we're praying for in some way, it's like, if we're just kind of too general, although sometimes I think, the universe knows better what we need and what we want than we do, but, like where we can know what we are seeking, and name it, but then, again, like he's saying, that it might not come in that exact way or how we imagine it. So, we can identify it clearly, and maybe that's through a specificity, but we can keep it light and neutral, right? And again, not so easily said and done, said as done, because there's a way that, our whole psyche is sort of attached and, programmed in this other way. So, we're talking here, and like I said, this is a later lecture, so presumably some work has been done, and, we can even, entertain this possibility, even if we can't embody it fully at this point. And we're kind of at this place where we're, recognizing, our attachment to the story and how to let go of the story a little bit more and that kind of thing. So again, you must be specific in one way, but not in another. If this seems confusing now, ask your inner being to relay the comprehension to your mind rather than trying to understand directly with your ego mind. The workings of the greater self so far surpass the mind's imagination that specificity would be a hindrance. Yet the mind must know what it wants, be prepared for it, reach for it, and claim it. Know that it deserves what it wants and will not misuse it. The outer mind must make constant changes in order to adapt itself to the greater scope of the inner God consciousness. Your outer mind must become empty and receptive, yet it must hold itself poised for all possibilities. Thus, it will be able to mate with the inner stillness and what appears at first as emptiness.
That's
Oh, Frank, you're muted. I'm sorry. You started speaking, and then I thought you stopped.
no, I pressed the button. I was not thinking, but anyways, it sounds complicated, yet in another way, it sounds almost like he's defining faith. You know, which is kind of an inexplicable kind of thing to have. I mean, I bet it'd be difficult if you really had real faith. I bet it'd be difficult for you to explain it to someone else who, who didn't have it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're onto, like there's something in, creative emptiness, and also in this space that he's defining, that is this positive expectancy that I would say, yeah, is, having faith. And then of course, again, from our childhood, like we've had a lot of positive expectancy that's gotten disappointed, or that's not panned out, or, and so then we've kind of gotten jaded, right? Where we've gotten to where we still want, but we basically don't expect to get it, and receive it. And so that can, block the capacity to, receive what we're longing for. And again, it's not even so much, mean, like in the long run, he says what we really are longing for is to, inhabit this new type of consciousness and let this new kind of consciousness inhabit us. And from that place, this will not be so difficult. This is difficult really from where we are in our journey and in our egoic comprehension of things. And so, I think even, Jesus said, like if we even had the faith of a grain of a mustard seed, right? We could move mountains. And so, it's like we don't have a lot of faith, and it's difficult. But here in this, kind of, it's like a place where we can get to. And I think in our journey, and again, like this is a later lecture in our path, we often begin to experience what he's talking about. The thing looks terrible and looks like, it's never gonna, be what we want or whatever. But then somehow life helps us. Things change, things do get, some dispensation or some kind of grace or some kind of other place. And I know sometimes it can seem like it's a long, long time in coming. But the guide is saying, that the negativity in the lower self is never permanent. It is always fleeting in some way. Now, fleeting in a lifetime is fleeting, right? So it could be a whole lifetime, but in the spiritual understanding, it's not fundamental reality. It's, illusion, and we're, living through it in a certain period of time, but it is not ultimate reality. And in the long run, it will dissolve and we will remain, and we will, I think, find what we're seeking. And especially right now, I think we're kind of going through a passage where, all of the old ways don't work so well. And everything, we've been programmed with and thought about and told, how to be successful or, be, happy in life. It's like they're not available in this time. And I think that goes back to what he's saying, about like this, we're in this transition. And so, in a way, I feel like, yeah, I'm terrified. I don't know where we're going. The whole world seems to be shaking. There's a million ways that, life could end. I don't know if most of them are just, everybody's scaring us or what, but there's this kind of, real, I think, vulnerability that we're all feeling right now. And I think that is what does hold me, is this, faith in, like, it looks really dark, but I'm also seeing these signs of evolution, of light, of, more people desiring to make a world, that isn't competitive and negative and, one-upmanship, and, to learn a dance of caring and cooperation and reunification in the human family. So, I think it is our longing for this that is calling it here and bringing it forth. That's my understanding from a lot of the channels that I've heard. And so, like this is again much earlier on that the guide is speaking of this, but it's like here we are in the midst of the end times in a way, and so we don't know where we're going, and we don't know what's gonna be on the other side, and in some ways we don't anyway, right? Any lifetime in any given moment, some kind of event could happen that would transform everything. So in a way, the ego mind has this illusion of continuity and this illusion that everything is okay and it's going to be the same and all of that. And when we put our faith in that kind of illusion, I mean, I think that's what spirit is trying to help us realize. It's like that's not stable out there. You got to find something here that will firm you and ground you and guide you, and guide you through a time of a lot of change and transformation. So
Yeah, I think there are actually some lectures that deal specifically with faith. In fact, if I remember correctly, back in my transformation program days, our class had pretty much determined that faith is the fourth divine quality gifted to men and, gifted to humanity, except it's basically much harder to activate than courage, love, and wisdom.
Mhm, mhm.
But it is a divine quality that resides in all of us. It's just that, like you say, it can be easily misguided. You can have faith in the wrong things.
And like you said, it's like I think, our deepest faith is, like, well, what has carried you thus far through life? You know, like through all of everything that you've already encountered, what has brought you thus far, right? And I think it's a subtle thing, you may not have felt like some strong, but without that faith, you would not have continued.
True.
So, I think it is ingrained in us, and I think it's part of our life force and part of whatever yes to life we have. And then, of course, that yes is, up against all of the, inner splits and the no's. But, it's like somehow, we have this fundamental yes and this fundamental faith within us that is what walks this path. And, I think I even understand, at some level, the observer self, the soul within us, even though it's experiencing all of this, it isn't traumatized. It isn't, challenged in the same way. It's like it's a learning experience, and, the soul receives it in a different way than the personality can. Okay. So shall we continue with a new fullness begins to manifest? Anybody else out there want to chime in here? So as you, go ahead. Yeah, help. Hey, Lori.
I don't know. I think something I heard once was like we have faith, but we're not like we always have faith, but faith is the ideas we choose to follow. But we put our faith in the ideas we choose to follow, which makes sense to me. It's like, oh, I think this person is, X, Y, and Z, and then I put my faith in that false belief.
Yeah. And I think if we put our faith in anything, smaller than God in the universe or something, like, I mean, in a way, like anything in the world of duality, like is not completely trustworthy, right? And even our beliefs, like Frank said, or you said, like we often have, like programs in us that tell us, well, just have faith in the book, but like that book, I mean, if you have real faith, maybe something in that book, will sustain you through a challenge. But if it's just a faith in some, idea that somebody gave you and told you to believe it, it's not going to be something that'll carry you very easy, very far, and so in some ways, I think the faith in anything but the true source is, being challenged now as well, right? And people do have a lot of faith in a lot of things. Money seems to be the main one, or whatever, including me. I'm not pointing finger. I'm a human being, right? So all of this is, in me as well. But there's a way that we're trying to go beyond that. We are trying to expand. We are trying to crack the cosmic egg that we've developed inside of and come out of that into a transformed butterfly reality. And so, and I think nothing short of that is really gonna save us. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get there and what we go through in the process, but I think it is, what will happen and is trying to happen. And, beyond that, I don't know how, because all of our brilliance and technological capacity and everything like that. It's like we need to catch up in the heart. And until we can, establish a greater union, then we're going to be in this competitive thing on a shrinking planet. Sounds like a recipe for chaos to me. So, so I'm praying for, what the guide is prophesying here, and others as well, and again, trusting, having faith, that there's something bigger that is transpiring, and nature knows how to, take us through this. We've never been through it. We don't have a clue. And we need to learn to tune into our own inner nature, trust ourselves, follow our inner guidance. And I think that's what's going to help us, find our own unique way. And also, I think most of us are here really in a way to serve, and help others during this process. And so, we're, trying to come online, and be that kind of support and help for many others that are going to be going through their process, their dark nights, their creative emptiness times. So as you do this in a spirit of patient, persevering, positive expectancy, yet empty in mind and soul, a new fullness can manifest. The inner stillness will begin to sing, as it were. From the energetic point of view, it will convey light and warmth. Strength you never knew you possessed will arise. From the point of view of consciousness, guidance will come for the biggest and smallest issues in your life. Receptive, creative emptiness must truly be nurtured. Listen with an inner ear, and yet you must not do this with urgency, but become receptive to when and how you will be filled. This is the only way, my friends, to find your inner sustenance, to find your divinity, and become a receptacle for the great universal power that is being released and will manifest in your life even more than you have already experienced. This is an important time in the history of evolution, and you are all needed to comprehend and perpetuate a great change in thinking and perception regarding the laws and the values that the Christ consciousness is spreading. The way must be open from within and from without to create as many receptacles as possible. The mind can be a hindrance or an aid to this process. You all know that your mind is limited only by your own concept of its limitations. To the degree you limit your mind, you cannot perceive what is beyond it. The mind is finite, and it must aim to spread the boundaries of its finiteness until it measures up with the infinite that is beyond the mind, but that is within yourself, right here, right now. So it's like the mind has to expand to be one with the fullness of the self, in a way. And right now, it's more of a hindrance and, challenge for us, so, but it can be, and it's interesting, when I heard this, when I was reading this, I was thinking, well, I struggle a lot with memory and ADHD and those kinds of non-neurotypical mental processes. And, I sometimes wonder, it feels such a given, and I've had it all my life. And, just it seems like, well, this is just, like a karmic handicap I brought in this lifetime. And maybe it's not a handicap, maybe it's a superpower. I don't know. But it certainly has been a teacher and a challenger and, part of, how come, I got kind of lost and confused in my life. And so, when, I think about, the mind as really being able to be infinite, that this mind can expand, that would be my prayer, let me have a mind that has a memory, that can organize, that knows how to, recall things and find things when Doesn't know where it put him down. So I'm hoping that maybe that might be true, and I won't have to carry this all my life. But I think some of the things that we carry are deep inside of us, and it's okay. It's like they're also the challenges that we learn to adapt to, and they expand us even in their limitations. So as it is now, you carry your mind with you almost as a burden, because it has become a closed circuit. Inside that circuit, there is a certain leeway for ideas, opinions, and possibilities you have made room for in your life as a result of your education and the mores of your society. That circuit contains what you have chosen to learn and adopt as knowledge, both as part of the group consciousness and as your personal experience. To the degree you have grown and expanded, the closed circuit of your mind has widened. However, it is still a closed circuit. You are still burdened with limiting ideas about yourself and your world. It is therefore necessary, in order to elicit creative emptiness, that you visualize the boundaries of your mind by questioning yourself about all the things that you think are impossible for you. Where you are hopeless and frightened, there must be an idea of finiteness that is simply locked into your mind. Thus, you lock out the great power that is here for all those who are ready to receive it honestly. Puncturing the closed circuit of the mind. Again, we have an apparent contradiction. On the one hand, it is necessary that this limited mind open itself up to new ideas and possibilities, as you have already learned to do in your meditation. You have seen infallibly that where you have made room for a desirable new possibility, it has indeed come into your life. You have also seen that when it does not come into your life, you deny that it can, for whatever reason. It is therefore necessary that you begin to puncture that closed circuit. You cannot immediately dissolve it. You live with the mind and you need your mind, but where you puncture your mind, the flow of new energy and consciousness can penetrate. Where it is not punctured, you stay locked within its narrow confines, which your spirit is fast outgrowing. On the other hand, your mind must rest, not hold opinions, being neutral, in order to be receptive to the great new force sweeping the inner universe of all consciousness. But let us return to the process of puncturing the limited mind. How do you do that? First, tell yourself that you do hold limited beliefs instead of taking them for granted. The next step is to challenge them. This requires taking the trouble to walk through, in the well-practiced attitude of self-observation and self-confrontation, your limited beliefs, and to truly think about them. Sometimes it is not just that you have a false belief and possibly a negative intentionality in holding on to it, but you can also see that you keep the circuit closed and deprive yourself of the inner plenitude you yearn for. Another law of great importance for this purpose is that the opening to the greater universal consciousness must not be approached in a spirit of magic, that it is supposed to eliminate the growing and learning process. It's like, I know a part of me, like, why can't I just have guidance? Because, then I wouldn't have to struggle with all of my questions and then, I never get any of that kind of guidance. And finally it dawned on me, I used to frustrate me and thought, what's wrong with me? I'm not, doing this right. And then finally it dawned on me, you know what? I bet if I got the guidance, I wouldn't want to listen to it because there's a part of me that kind of really has to know it in my own being, right? And so guidance can come through our own intuition, through our own inner work. It doesn't have to just be, automatic. And like an understanding, like that probably, I mean, maybe it'll happen, again, the healing of the mind, we're opening many, many capacities and new ones. So maybe one of these days I'll hear, Christ speaking to me or my own higher self or the angels or something like that. My inner guides, I know I have them, right? But I think in my particular life journey, it's not, like for them to come and guide me in that same way that many people do receive it. And I'm, working on another understanding of, how to receive guidance and how to follow guidance, right? And how to make it, sort of coming from my own deepest inner choice and reality. A lot of us have issues maybe with authority, right? And so where we see God and angel, all of those beings as whole divine authority, if we have some part of our child that's still kind of rebellious and kind of faced authority that was superimposed, an authority that was unhealthy for it, we still have, a process of healing before we can open and, be totally surrendered to the divine authority that does want to help and guide us, right? And in the meantime, there are many ways that we can work with it and receive it and know it from within our own self, test it within our own self, right? That's required. We're not supposed to just be puppets here. So another law of great importance for this purpose is that the opening to the greater universal consciousness, okay, I read that, must not be approached in a spirit of magic that is supposed to eliminate the growing and learning process. Now, this ultimate power is supposed to fill and sustain you. However, your outer mind must go through the steps of acquiring whatever knowledge is necessary. You will all see this in the arts and sciences. You cannot be inspired as a great artist, no matter how much genius you have, unless you learn the craft and the technical dexterity. If the childish lower self wants to use the channel to the greater universe in order to avoid the initial tedium of learning and becoming, the channel will remain closed. For this amounts to cheating, and God cannot be cheated. When you cheat, the personality may become seriously doubtful that anything beyond the mind exists, because no inspirational response comes forth when using magic to coddle your laziness and self-indulgence. The same is true of science or any other field. Now, how about this same law with respect to inspiration for your personal life and decisions? Here too, you must not fail to go through the work that the outer ego self has to do in order to become a proper channel for the God consciousness. You do this in your pathwork. You need to truly know yourself, your weaknesses, your lower self, where you are corruptible, where you are dishonest or tend to be. And, maybe where you never are like that, but, we all have, like pride, self-will, and fear, right? Those are the aspects of the personal lower self. And if none of the others, we always usually have fear within us. I'm praying now, like with the fear of these times in some sense to, what would it be like if I didn't have any fear? My God, that would be revolutionary, right? And I do believe that's where we're going, right? This stuff is, very familiar to us. And so we just take it for granted. But, try to imagine, what your life would be like without fear, because, that's what we're transforming. And in some ways, maybe we're going through all of our deepest fears, facing it, experiencing it. And in that, in its very self, is going to liberate us, right? So any comments or questions? So you need to okay, read that. Okay, so as you all know, this is hard work, but it needs to be done. If you avoid it, the channel will never really be reliable and may contain a lot of wishful thinking stemming from your desire nature. Or it may reveal truth that is based on guilt and fear and is thus equally unreliable, right? It's like even the truth, if it's coming from a distorted channel, or understanding, is not full truth, right? Only when you work in this fashion on your development will you come to a point when you no longer confuse gullibility and wishful thinking with faith, or doubt with discrimination. As a great pianist can be a channel for higher inspiration only when he goes through the finger exercises and the hours of practice that make his playing finally effortless. So must God-inspired people work on their purification process, on deep self-knowledge and self-honesty. Only then does the receptacle become commensurate with the higher truths and values, fit to be influenced and used for higher purposes to enrich the world and the self. At the same time, you need to cultivate a neutrality. Your devotion to fulfilling the will of God must include an attitude that whatever comes from God is all right, whether you desire it or not. This is very hard. This is the work with the will. And, for me, this is kind of my cutting edge, because a lot of little things even that, bug me and that I do not desire, and then it's very hard for me to kind of accept that it's all right. I like the beautiful 12-step, prayer, or like at least I used a serenity prayer, right? That I think is so right on and so powerful in so many ways. It's not so easy always to live it, but like we really do want to change the things we can, and that's where our will gets involved, right? And to discern that is not so easy. But where we can begin to see a pattern, where we can begin to see, sort of the mirroring back of, like the more resistance we have, the more resistance we're getting back from the universe, whatever like that. There's this way that, we can sort of seek to try to relax the will a little and trust God a little more, have a little more faith in God, even though what we're seeing doesn't seem to be what we want and at all good for us, right? And it's hard. It's very difficult. So, again, this path, like the guide says, we're really working to transcend our own consciousness, and this is a huge thing. So he says, too much desire is as much a hindrance as the absence of all desire, which manifests as resignation and hopelessness. The refusal to endure any kind of frustration creates an inner tension and defensive structure that close up the vessel of the mind and maintain the closed circuit. In other words, you as a receptacle need to be neutral. You need to give up the strong, tight, self-willed yes or no to make way for a flexible trust guided by your inner God. And this takes some time and, some transformation, to even get to this place, but it is available. And, the process, I believe, is unerring. And even when we're, sort of going in the opposite direction or resisting with all our might, I think it's leading us closer and closer to our, transformation. So, that faith, I think, is possible. It's real, and there is definitely an awareness in my being that, we can't possibly do this alone. And we don't, like that's a part of our difficulty is we think it's all on us and we can't figure it out and we can't do it. And basically, I think, we're not being asked to do it, especially all by ourselves, but we are all being asked to try to, accept who we are moment to moment and what is moment to moment. And this is a tall order. But when we do, and there are many times when, we can, and then challenging times when it's not even possible. But the practice of the times when we can, you might begin to notice how, like things kind of smooth out or things flow a little better. And then, maybe out of the blue, the universe, gives us a whack and, spins us in the opposite direction again. But usually there's a cause and effect that we can begin to experience directly, where we can kind of look to just accept and work with, what's here, and trust in a way that it's going to take us where we're trying to go, whether it looks like that in the moment or not. So we need to be willing, pliable, flexible, trusting, and forever ready for another change you had not contemplated. What is right now may not be right tomorrow. There is no fixedness when it comes to the divine life that springs from within your innermost being. This idea makes you insecure, for you believe that security lies in fixed rules. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is one of those beliefs that needs to be challenged. Envision that in the idea of forever meeting every new situation by being inspired anew, there lies a new land of security that you have not found as yet. What is right in one situation may not be right in another. This is one of those laws of the new age that is opposed to the old stable laws, according to which what is fixed and unchangeable is secure. The laws that pertain to this new venture into your creativity and life need to be studied very carefully. You must work with them. These are not just words to listen to. You need to make them your own. So, I want to just go back a minute and like this, to me, this is really kind of like it in a nutshell, is like there is this new security that we're trying to step into that comes from being completely present moment to moment with what is and what is arising. And when we can let go of our resistance and be present, then the channel for that Christ consciousness is open, and it's not, little Darlene that meets that challenge. It's, the God self that all of a sudden is inspired to come forth in that moment by little Darlene just being willing to be present and staying with it. So, and in that, what could be more secure than, like literally, following the flow of God within us and receiving the guidance or I've had this happen, where I'm, my personality is in one track and then I stop and I hold and I go into creative emptiness and I pause and I be with the feelings and then out of that cauldron comes this clarity and inspiration, that knows, what to do, what to say, and it comes from a very different place in me. And so it's not coming from my defenses or my stuff. And so people don't react to it in the same way. So, and this is the kind of security that I think we're ultimately seeking. But like the guide says, it can't be a fantasy. This is a deep development that we're all trying to do, and we're all getting a great deal of help with, and we're all kind of stuck in the middle, yet we're not fully there. And so it's challenging. And yet there's this possibility, in these challenges, because they're kind of preventing the old fixed laws to function anymore, that they kind of take us off of the clinging to the bank and out into the flow of the river. And even though that seems really scary, that's really what's going to help us and what we need to do. So the laws that pertain to this new venture into your inner creativity and life need to be studied carefully. You must work with them. I think I read that. These laws are apparently full of contradiction. You need to acquire knowledge. The mind must be expanded. It must be able to conceive of truthful possibilities. And yet you also must make your mind neutral and empty. This seems contradictory from the point of view of the dualistic consciousness, but from the point of view of the new consciousness that is spreading through your inner universe, these are not contradictions at all. For years, I have tried to show you in many areas how this principle works. Something that is in truth and commensurate with the higher laws of life conciliates opposites that are mutually exclusive on the lower level of consciousness. What is conflict-producing on the lower level is mutually helpful and interactive on the higher level. Making your mind an instrument of unification. More and more you will discover the truth of unification, where dualities cease to exist and contradictions no longer contradict, where you experience two previous opposites as valid aspects of the same truth. You know, we're in quantum physics land, you know, it's like, yeah, light is a wave and a particle, right? When you begin to comprehend this principle and apply it to your own life, your outlook and values, then you are indeed ready to receive the new consciousness released in realms far beyond your own. When I say that you must not approach your divine channel with the attitude that it should save you from the work of living and growing, I am not contradicting the necessity of being passively receptive. It is simply a shift of balance. Where you have been overactive with your mind, you now need to quiet down and allow things to happen, let things happen. Where you insisted on taking the controls, you must now relinquish them and let an inner power take over. On the other hand, where before you tended to be lazy and self-indulgent or looked for the line of least resistance and therefore made yourself dependent on others, you now need to take over and actively nurture the principle so that help to establish the channels to your inner God self. So sort of the activity that we have right now is, to, maybe actively practice creative emptiness, right? That has to be a choice. And even though it's a receptive practice, we have to actively choose to do it. And so there's other things like this where we can actively choose to kind of collapse the dualities or seek the unification of two apparent opposites and those kinds of things. You also need to actively express God's messages in life. Thus, activity and passivity need to be reversed. Your mind will thus become an instrument. It will open up, puncture its limitations, and acquire new concepts, lightly, not tightly, with which to play around with for a while. This attitude of lightness in your perceptions, of flexibility, of motility of mind, will make you the most receptive to your apparent emptiness. Now, my friends, as we approach this emptiness, how does it feel? What is it all about? Again, the human language is extremely limited, and it is almost impossible to squeeze this kind of experience into the context of language. I will try my very best to give you some tools, however. As you listen into your inner chasm, it seems at first to be a black gulf of emptiness. What you feel at this point is fear. This fear seems to fill you up. What is this fear? It is as much a fear of finding yourself to indeed be empty as of finding yourself with a new consciousness, with a new being evolving within you. Although you yearn for this, you also fear it. The fear exists in both possibilities. You want the new consciousness so much that you fear disappointment. And yet you also fear finding this consciousness because of all of the obligations and changes that this might impose on you. You must travel through both these fears. On this path, you have received the tools to deal with such fears by questioning your lower self, going into emptiness. But the time comes when you are ready, notwithstanding the fear, because you have already made the connections. You know, for example, what your lower self wants and why you have negative intentions. The time comes when, in spite of the fear, you decide calmly and quietly to go into the emptiness. So you empty your mind in order to meet the emptiness deep within. Lo and behold, very soon that very emptiness will feel not full the same way you are used to, but it will contain a new aliveness that the old artificial fullness of your mind made impossible. In fact, you will soon find out that you made yourself artificially dull by packing yourself tight in the mind because of its noise, and tight within your channel by contracting your energy into hard knots of defense. You had killed your aliveness with this artificial fullness. So you became needier because without your inner life, you could not be fulfilled in a real sense. A vicious circle became established as you strove to get fulfillment from outside, since you refused to go through the necessary steps to make fulfillment first manifest within. In one sense, you fear the aliveness more than the emptiness, and perhaps you had better face that. When you make yourself sufficiently empty, the first initial response is an inner aliveness, and you tend to immediately shut the lid tight again. Yet by denying your fear, you also deny that you are really very unhappy about your lack of aliveness. But lack of aliveness comes from fearing it. You can make the fear give way to aliveness by letting yourself be creatively empty. So I don't know if anybody, recognizes that or, finds that useful to kind of apply. But it's a different thought for me, that, this, I know, like, we have both, longing for more aliveness and fear of this transition and all that it can possibly bring, and so, and including, in our own self, because, it is truly a kind of transformation that is, I think we're still going to recognize ourselves in some ways, but I don't think we're going to, remember ourselves at all in the same way. So, and we don't know what that means, and it's an unknown. And so fear of the unknown is definitely there, right? And so, we just have to kind of keep going back and forth and, working with it in ourselves, not judging it, not, forcing ourselves, but exploring it, and questioning, like, well, what possibly would I be afraid of in more aliveness? I mean, what pops into my head sometimes is, I'm impulsive enough and, and, I might, really say some things that are going to hurt people or make them mad. So, I don't know, if that's a true fear, but, that kind of just popped into my head as an example of something like that. Why else, do we dull our aliveness? One image that came to me a long time ago that I like a lot is like the life force, is like if you imagine water flowing through a hose, the hose is a container. And of course, the wider the hose is, the more force can flow through it. And then if the hose kind of becomes obstructed, maybe picking up debris or inner blocks or things like that, like a full blast of force through the hose, probably puts pressure and discomfort. And, so like if we're feeling that, what we want to do is turn down the tap, right? So we just kind of keep turning down the tap so that the pain and the struggle and what we're feeling, that's blocking, doesn't feel as difficult. And yet, as we turn down that tap, less and less life force and more, self-destructiveness in some way. And so, partly what the guide is saying there, we have to be willing to feel all our feelings. We have to be willing, to tolerate, these different barriers within us, and resistances that, and self-judgments or whatever that, block that full life force from, making its way through our own channel. So it's an interesting thought that, by exploring creative emptiness, we can help our fear of that aliveness let go. And I have a feeling that, part of it is that in that space, as we go through that, sitting creative emptiness, it's not, we can manage that and come to this place where the aliveness, like you said, feels soft and warm and comforting and good, right? Instead of, like all of what we're afraid of. And so somehow by dropping into the creative emptiness, I think we, kind of bypass whatever our egoic channel is, and can make a direct contact through that to our real self a little more. And so, if people, want to try to practice that, it might be a good thing. I don't know, if there's, again, he doesn't give very, very concise instructions on how to do that meditation. But you can explore with yourself. And like I said, I think there are other meditative disciplines that also work with that. So, just stilling the mind is like kind of one thing. How do we calm that and quiet that mind? And that's where a lot of the challenge is in this work. But it's like that's just kind of flotsam and jetsam, and in a way, like I like Eckhart Tolle. He talks about that there's a dimension of stillness that everything arises out. And so, like, you can be in the midst of the woods and there's all kinds of birdsong and breeze blowing and things like that, but you can still feel this underlying field of stillness that's there holding it all, And so, in a way, you might consider, like, even if you have a busy mind, that, that's just chatter at the surface. And that below that is this other dimension of stillness. And you might be able to just, like not worry about trying to stop the mind, but drop down below the mind into the stillness. So you could maybe try that. It says actual experience. So you will experience your whole inner being, including your body and your energy, as a vibrantly alive inner tube. Energy goes through it, feelings go through it, and something else is vibrantly coming to the fore that you cannot as yet name. If you do not shy away from that unnameable something, it will sooner or later turn out to be constant inner instruction, truth, encouragement, wisdom, guidance, specifically destined to your life right now, wherever you need it most. That emptiness, that vibrant, alive emptiness is God talking to you. At any moment of the day, it is talking to you where you need it most. If you really wish to attune to it and hear it, you will discern it, first vaguely, later more strongly. You need to condition your inner ear to recognize it as you begin to recognize the vibrant voice that speaks in wisdom and love, not in generalities, but specifically to you. You will know that this voice has always existed in you, but you have conditioned yourself not to hear it. And in that conditioning, you have tightened and packed up that inner tube that will fill you with the inner vibrant music of the angels. When I say the music of the angels, I do not necessarily mean this literally, although that too may exist. But what you need more is the guidance for every decision about what opinion or attitude to adopt in a given situation. That instruction is truly comparable to the music of the angels in its glory. This fullness cannot be described in its wonder. It is a treasure beyond all words. It is what you constantly look and yearn for. But most of the time you are not aware of this searching and projected onto substitute fulfillments that you expect to come from outside. Let me back up here a little. So he's talking here about, this, ongoing guidance, that, gives us a fullness. And I was trying to find this one thing. Okay, so for every decision about what opinion or attitude to adopt in a given situation, right? So when we come into circumstances and situations, we usually have reactions, or we have our history that's coming into it and our projections maybe onto it, so, like this new place in creative emptiness, we can kind of clear that reactive place and just wait. And then this infusion of the higher self of, true guidance comes in, and it really does take in, like our larger self, our capacity for love and what's going on with everybody else, like, so we see the situation very clearly, and we automatically know, what it's calling forth, compassion, or, a hug, or, some words of even confrontation, maybe, but in a loving way, but there's a way in which we can speak truth with love in that situation. And we can feel that the situation is kind of calling it forth from us, right? We're not trying to create it within us. It's naturally flowing out of us. And that's where I think our true joy and our true, capacity to be in service as the living will of God on earth, will come into full operation. So refocus on what has always existed within you. Your mind and outer will have confused and complicated your life. So this new contact is like finding your way out of a maze you have created. You can now recreate your inner landscape without that maze. So, that's a good image, I think, and a good metaphor. The new person as the receptacle of universal intelligence. Now, my dearest friends, I would like to say a few words about the new person in the new era. What is the new person? The new person is indeed always a receptacle of the universal intelligence, the divine consciousness, the Christ consciousness that permeates every particle of being and of life. The new person is not functioning from the habitual intellect. For many centuries, the intellect had to be cultivated to fulfill its role as an important stepping stone in humanity's evolution. By now, the overemphasis has gone on too long. This does not mean you should revert to purely blind emotional desire in nature. Rather, it means you should open up to a higher realm of consciousness within you and let it unfold. There was a period in evolution when it was as hard for people to find their ability to think, to weigh, to discriminate, to retain knowledge, to remember, in short, to use all the faculties of the mind, as it now seems hard to find contact with the higher self. The new person has established a new balance in the inner system. The new intellect must not be left out. It is an instrument that must serve, become unified with the greater consciousness. For many ages, people believed that the intellectual faculties were the highest form of development, and some still believe this now. So they may make no attempt to journey further and deeper into their inner nature to find greater treasures. On the other hand, there are many spiritual movements that practice discarding and inactivating the mind altogether. This is equally undesirable because it creates splits rather than unification. The function of the intellect in the new person. Both these extremes are half-truths, though they can have relative validity. For example, in the past, people were like beasts, undisciplined and irresponsible as far as their immediate desires were concerned. They were totally driven by emotions and desires, regardless of ethics and morality. So for that stage of development of the intellect fulfilled its function. And the intellect also fulfilled its function as a very sharp tool of learning, of discriminating. But when it ends there, it becomes futile. People become pitiful when they cannot become animated by their divinity. By the same token, the practice of leaving the mind temporarily inactive is advisable, and I recommend it myself. But to treat the mind as if it were the devil and to oust it from your life is missing the point. In either extreme, people lack something. They need all their functions in working order to express their divinity. Without a mind, you become a passive amoeba. When the mind is deemed the highest faculty, you become a hyperactive robot. The mind then becomes a computerized machine. True aliveness exists only when you wed the mind with the spirit and allow the mind to express the feminine principle for a while. Until now, the mind has been very much linked with the masculine principle, action, drive, control. Now the mind has to express the feminine principle, receptivity. This does not mean that you will become passive. In a sense, you will become more active, more truly independent than you were before. For when the mind receives inspirations from the God consciousness, they must be put into action. But this putting into action is harmonious, effortless, not like a cramp. When your mind is receptive, it can be filled with the higher spirit within you. Then the functioning becomes totally different, forever new and exciting. Nothing becomes routinized, nothing becomes stale, nothing becomes redundant, for the spirit is forever alive and changing. This is the energy and experience you have increasingly in your community where the new influx is working so strongly. The new person makes all decisions from this new consciousness after working his or her way through to becoming truly receptive to the spiritual being within. And sometimes that means, clearing out the other voices and the other, defenses and beliefs and thought forms and stuff that, are in the way. So the results would sound utopian for someone who has not begun to experience this. I'm happy to say that quite a number of you are already part of this strong cosmic movement for which you have made yourself available. You experience thereto undreamed of expansion and joy, resolution of problems that you never thought possible, and it continues. There are no limitations to your fulfillment, to the peace, to the productivity, to the creativity of living, to joy, love, and happiness, and to the meaning your life has acquired as you serve a greater cause, entering the new greater life. The time has passed for each individual to live only for a selfish, immediate little life. This can no longer continue. Those who insist on this way lock themselves out from a power that would turn destructive in a mind that is still geared to selfishness. For that selfishness comes from the false belief that you are happy only when you are selfish and unhappy when you are unselfish. That false belief is one of the first myths you need to explore and challenge. You are creating a new life for yourself and your environment, a kind that humanity has not yet known. You are preparing for it. Others are preparing for it here and there, all over the world, quietly. These are golden nuclei that spring up out of the gray, dark matter of untruthful thinking and living. So further that channel in you. It will bring you the excitement and the peace you always wanted. Enter this new phase, my dearest friends, with courage and affirmation. Rise up and become who you truly are and experience life at its best. All of you are blessed, my very dearest ones. The blessings will give you the sustenance you need to go all the way with all of yourself and become enlivened, activated, actualized by the God within. Be in peace. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the share and open it up. Any comments or last questions? How are the new people doing? I guess we lost one of you. I'm not seeing Laura. So, or there were two Lauras, I guess. So, anybody else want to share anything or make a final comment here? Laura, are you still with us? I'm just kind of curious how that landed for you. Is that something totally unfamiliar and new, or is that something that you can relate to? Must have lost Laura. Okay. Frank, are you talking? You're muted.
Okay, I see that Laura had a question though in the question
Oh,
box,
okay. Cool.
and it says, are they saying the Holy Spirit is the same as empty space?
I think you could make an interesting, proposition. In fact, there was an old paper from the early, colonization of the United States by one of the ministers, early ministers, and he actually made that argument, so but I think, empty space is the totality also, it's flowing through everything. I would say one way to look at it is maybe the quantum field, right?
Um,
And so everything is, rising up and falling back into that in some sense, and it seems to be affected by consciousness, right? And so, but I think, I often do, feel like the presence of the Holy Spirit is most, again, we have to be receptive, and to be receptive, we have to be in empty space, and maybe then the Spirit is something that comes into that space, or maybe the Spirit is already naturally just alive in that space. I think it could maybe be looked at either way. So I don't know if you're still with us and that answered your question, but nice question. Thank you. And we will be posting this on the YouTube channel. So anybody else?
No, that was very good though. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, everybody. Have a
Thank you.
good
Thank you,
night.
Marlene.
Yep.
Thank you.
Blessings to all. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.